right, so let's just go over the basics of truth tables. Unless you understand these basics, you will not be able to do the rest of the sections that involve truth tables. The facts that I'm going to go over here are something you should have memorized to make the rest of the section much easier. Okay? Well, what a truth table does is organize all of the truth values that a statement can take on. So let's start off with our easiest statement, which is just P. P can be either a true or a false statement. Okay? So since I want to take into account all of the values that P can take, in this truth table I'm going to consider when P is true and when P is false. Our first logical connective that we studied is not. And what not does is it just changes your value. So if you're true, it will change to false. And if it's false, it changes to true. Okay, so the easy way to remember not is just change it from true to false or false to true. In order to look at our other logical connectives, we need more than one statement. So I'm going to start off with having just two statements, P and Q. And since I want to take into account all possible combinations of P and Q, well, P can be true and Q could be true. That would be one combination. The next combination I'm going to look at is when P is true and Q is false, or when P is false and Q is true. And finally, the last combination I can have is when both P and Q are false. Now, what I have written here is the basic form of a two-statement truth table. So under the first simple statement, you'll have two truths followed by two falses. And under your second simple statement, it'll alternate true, false, true, false. Okay? Now let's first construct the truth table for the and. The easy way to remember and is that a compound statement with an and is false if there's a false for either of the statements. So for example, true and false. False, false and true. False, false and false is false. And the only way a statement with an and is true is if both statements are true. So I always like to remember the and by telling myself, if there's a false, it's false. Now for the or, it's a little bit different, but similar. With an or statement, if one of the simple statements is true, then the whole statement will be true. So for example, true or true would be true. True or false, true. False or true, true. And then false or false will be false. So notice how it's a little opposite than the and statement. For the and statement, if there's a false, it's false. For or, if there's a true, it's true. So that's how I remember my and my or statements. Okay? So now let's look at the conditional and the biconditional. Again, I have two simple statements. So under P, two truths, two falses. And under Q, I'm going to alternate true, false, true, false. And this is the standard in building a truth table. All right, so then let's look at the conditional. The way I remember the conditional is to remember when it's false. The only way a conditional is false is if you have a true followed by a false. So if true, then false is false. Otherwise, the statement is true. So that's the rule for the conditional. It's false if you have a true followed by a false. Otherwise, it's true. The biconditional is similar. In the biconditional, if both statements have the same truth value, it's true. Otherwise, it's false. So in this case, where you have true if and only if true, since they're the same, it's true. False if and only if false is true because they are the same. In both of these cases, since the statements have different truth values, then it is false. All right, in the case when we have to fill out a truth table with 3 simple statements, P, Q, and R, then to set up the truth table, you set it up by putting 4 truths followed by 4 falses under P. Okay, so that's the standard. 4 truths, 4 falses. Under Q, then you're going to put 2 truths followed by 2 falses, 2 truths followed by 2 falses, and under R, you're going to alternate. True, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. And this is the standard for setting up a truth table with 3 simple statements. So the first statement, 4 by 4, the second statement, 2 by 2, and under the last statement, you alternate your truth values. And in this case, you've listed all of the different truth value combinations for a 3-statement compound statement.